Hello and welcome to a new episode of MyRPG podcast. On today's episode we have Tommy from Black Dragon Gaming. He does a YouTube channel based primarily on Pathfinder content, lore, and discussions of the new forthcoming second edition of Pathfinder. Tommy is a great guy with an amazing work ethic, and we get to have a great conversation about kind of his transition into making YouTube content, the reception, and we even get to talk a little bit about death metal, which I, of course, love. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Welcome one and all to a new episode of MyRPG podcast. Today's guest is Tommy from Black Dragon Gaming. Tommy, will you please introduce yourself?
What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. I'm super stoked to be here. Like the man said, I run a little YouTube channel called Black Dragon Gaming. We are aiming to be your number one source of Pathfinder content on YouTube, both first edition and second edition. We've got myriads upon myriads of video series coming out every week. And yeah, like I said, we're just trying to be like the big guys in the scene because there's so much after like 10 years and you decide, hey, no one's really doing this. There's a lot of races and a lot of like regions and stuff that nobody knows about because we're all just playing core races. Let's make a series about them. And then here's second edition. So the workload gets all kinds of crazy, but it's a whole lot of fun. And again, so happy to be here with you, man.
Yeah, so we're going to jump right into the Pathfinder stuff in just one moment, but let's go to the genesis here, the very beginning. Tommy, how did you get into RPGs?
Oh, God. That's a good question. I guess I have to say I got into RPGs being like I'm 27 now, being like 10, 11 years old. My mother's shopping at Walmart, and I get kind of like left in the electronics department. Back in the day when they had PS2s set up and you had to like lean back really far to play them. And this was around the time that Final Fantasy X came out. And that was probably my first like experience with turn-based stuff. And also, I guess I have to plug like Neverwinter Nights, Temple of Elemental Evil, all those like computer RPGs that we all played. Well, if we haven't played, you should. They're sweet. That like you just kind of get your hands on as a kid because you like swords and magic and dragons and noise. And you play them and they're really fun. And as you get older, you get like, I guess the first time I ever played like with dice, I would have been like 19, 20 years old in college, and somebody had all this stuff and we all just dove in. And then I got the bug. From there, there had been like groups fall apart and stuff. So there'd been breaks in between here and there. I haven't been playing just continuously since, but I've known ever since around then that I really enjoyed it. And it was something I really liked to do, if for no other reason, to like take a break from real life and do that like group problem solving with a side of bad puns that most tabletop role-playing games will like bring into the fore all the time. As far as Pathfinder, well, I guess like as far as playing seriously went, would have been the spring of 2014, where I went to my local game store. They had started a Pathfinder group there. There was like 11 players. Present day, there's just 3 of us. 4 years later, but that group held together. We meet 2 or 3 times a week to roll dice. And yeah, I guess that's how I got started.
Yeah, and there's a kind of great span of time there you can talk about. But so what do you think was the first thing? I think you touched on it a little bit there about escapism, kind of getting away from your everyday life and either doing communicative problem solving or role playing. Was that the kind of draw to you? Was that the idea, the communicative role playing and problem solving and collaborativeness?
Yeah, I think I could say that. Also, there's something to be said for like the video game where you can literally do whatever you want. Like everybody loves Skyrim, everybody loves Fallout, but I really dislike getting to the edge of the map and I'm just kind of jogging in place as someone is saying, you can't go that way.
Yeah, that's absolutely like that kind of breaking the verisimilitude or breaking the kind of immersion that you feel whenever you have a game that says, oh, this is an open world and you can do whatever you like. The first time you try to, jump over that weird sort of fence and it doesn't let you do it, or you're trying to go to that inaccessible area, that immediately reminds you of like, well, this is a game with limitations. Yeah. So with RPGs, we kind of supersede that ability because of the true open-endedness of the true open-endedness of the way the game is played. English. There we go.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. That's why I like these games so much, is like within the confines of the D20, if you want to do it, well, I guess I shouldn't say within the confines of the D20, within the confines of whatever dice you roll to make your system do what it does. If you want to do it, you can at least try. If you want to go, like, I remember one time, this was a couple years ago, we have Pathfinder has this really big map of the inner sea region that you can buy, and we have it hanging where we play. And we had a new guy come in, and this guy joined midway through a campaign. He didn't know what he was going to do. So what he did was he brought a Nerf gun, and we didn't know. He just kind of like out of nowhere stood up, pulled it out of his backpack, and he's playing a wizard. And he just, I teleport here, shoots at the map. And then suddenly Tommy, the GM, has to improv for 3 hours as he goes to like the other side of the world and does his own thing. But the point is, you can do that here, and that's what makes it so much fun.
Yeah, and I think that's the draw for a lot of people as well. Were your early games kind of lackadaisical and comical like that all the time, or was there a more focus towards role playing, or what was it like?
My early games were kind of just like we would show up on Friday and throw dice around. There was a very like revolving door of GMs, I suppose you could say, where like you do a one shot, you do a one shot, you do like a two shot, because we ended up doing something else in the middle, and then I would do a one shot, and it would just go like this. Because back in the very beginning, this was just a bunch of people who played, and there was, including me, 10 people. So it was really like, it was controlled chaos. There was a lot of people who just be like watching TV in the other room, like, oh, it's my turn. I cast this, rolls the dice. I do this much. I'll go back in here now.
Okay,
Forever and ever and ever.
so your experience was very casual then in that regard, because the rotating GM and the fact that I guess people are doing other things and then kind of popping in and out of the game there. So it was very much a kind of a game night sort of thing, rather than like, this is our setting, this is our campaign, this is our main focus.
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember actually I was the first GM in that group to like start a campaign, and we do like this still the revolving door of GMs. But when the revolving door revolved to someone else, it would be a one shot always. And oh, hey, it's Tommy's turn. Oh, okay. I'll GM for 15 more sessions, and my sorcerer is a GM PC. Everyone loves that. Haha, I'll fireball them for you. I'm a turret. It only like, it's been very recently that rather that I've been fortunate enough to meet a bunch of players that are equally into the game, equally like not just game night, taking it really serious. We're coming here, we all have this much backstory, we're all doing this much in this setting, and this is what is happening. And like played it as this big thing as rather game night. But I'm really glad that I found that, because that's part of the reason I'm able to do the channel that I do. And it's part of like probably about 60-70% of my free time and fun, because again, nothing really quite compares.
Yeah, and nothing against, obviously there's some people who like that casual approach to your RPGs. I know West Marches is a popular thing for people who have a large group who kind of want to casually play a game without a defined campaign or a defined time to play. But for me as well, like I find the best games I have are the ones where people are committed and seriously into the world, or seriously into their characters, and come in with a purpose and goal, because that sort of it's this kind of beautiful cycle that feeds the GM or DM for her or him to to create more in depth or more layered content. And then, of course, when the players get to play it themselves and they feel immersed in this world, or they feel immersed in their characters, like they're making a difference, then it brings more out of them. And I think that's a beautiful kind of feedback loop that happens there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why I always like my players, when they sit down, even if it's like a one shot, I always have my players give me 1-page typed backstory so I can like mess around with that kind of stuff. My channel has, and at the beginning of the series, we were still kind of like fake it till you make it over at Black Dragon Gaming, so the audio is real bad. But we figured out what we were doing, and I have, at max we had 8 players. Right now we're at 6, and we're about to hit somebody's hometown, and he's about to have a bunch of revelations that he's never going to see coming, and I'm super 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 stoked for it. But I'm super stoked for it because like it's not just like some harebrained, well, okay, it's kind of a harebrained idea out of my head, but I couldn't do it without his head as well. And it reminds you that, and I've seen this meme floating around recently, like, it's not your story, you are not JK Rowling. it's a shared narrative. And again, that's another just like nail in the coffin, has a bad connotation, but another nail in the coffin for why tabletop role playing games are so great.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of that, and we're going to get into your channel in just 1 second, is that this inspires us GMs to, of course, yeah, we're creating content. We think we want to be these like master storytellers, but realistically, at the end of the day, we're just really, really good at creating a premise, which then the players run with, and then the conclusion is really up to them. You just kind of you're improvising or figuring out as you go along the way. I know some people love modules, some people love kind of more linear storytelling, and there's a great place for that as well. And I can't wait to have an episode where I talk exclusively with people about modules and things like that. But for me personally, in the games I've played in the past 5 or so years, I'd have to say the open-endedness of running a game and playing with people where you don't know what's going to come next, but you know you're always kind of on edge about the unpredictability is so rewarding. And then that I'm way more creative now that I've been in a super long time, hence the podcast. So
yeah, for sure.
Tying into that then, so where's that leap coming in, and why Pathfinder specifically?
Why Pathfinder? Well, I started at 3.5 because 3.5 was the big one when I was like, again, on like casual game night. I think 4th edition existed, but no one, like, we don't talk about 4th edition. I'm sure there's people that like 4th edition. I'm not trying to disparage it, but that was the feel, because some of the guys were probably like 10 years older than me, and they all just had like the old, even like 3.0, I think, monster manuals that they're just slamming on the table. Pathfinder for me, it combines the crunch that I personally really enjoy. I like thinking, okay, well, I have a new character to build. 3 hours later, I'm coming out of the lab with some crazy optimized, crunchy, weird thing. But you also combine that with, and I guess this feeds into the crunch as well, but Pathfinder has, before 2nd edition, like 10 years worth of stuff, and you can pretty much build whatever it is you want, however it is you want to play it, with pretty much like the only limit is balance and your imagination. Pathfinder's even got like, in my game I'm playing I'm GMing rather for someone who is playing a half troll, but Pathfinder has no rules for that. Pathfinder's advanced race guide in the back of the book has a like race builder, so we just whipped it up right there, and there it was. Pretty much any, like, to say archetypes is a little ironic, I guess, for Pathfinder, but like whatever character archetype you want to play, it's right there. There's I think personally there are enough feats floating around in Pathfinder, like for even like the casuals, to keep up with the really optimized guys, because like basically there's that one line you can take, like, I want to be good at this, you take it. And there's also the line for like people that want to like go over the top of that, they can, but you can still, like, the little guy can keep up. Also, like, I guess I see Pathfinder, I think we all see Pathfinder really as the spiritual successor, and it just like that feels like home for me. Again, that might be because I grew up on like Temple of Elemental Evil, not the really old module, but the computer RPG, and like Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, recently Pillars of Eternity, real good game in that same vein. But it's just like all of those, and those are all 3.5. Pathfinder is just that cleaned up. I've played a little 5th edition in my time. I don't like, honestly, I don't get invited to a lot of 5e games. I'd like to learn more about it for sure. But it's just like, again, that's where everything I've learned just kind of dumps into Pathfinder, and that's why it's become my favorite.
And I have a limited experience with Pathfinder, and I'm more versed in 5e as well. But everything I've looked at Pathfinder, I actually did happen to get a great Humble Bundle about a year or so ago with a bunch of fantastic Pathfinder material, and just looking at the breadth of the character creation abilities, looking at the breadth of the world and the races and how much background you have, and you actually start touching on this in your channel, which we keep alluding to. It's very easy to notice that Pathfinder is this great kind of step up for the D&D fan who enjoys like 5th edition, which prides itself on simplicity and accessibility. But if you want to take it one step further, get really refined, get really tuned in, and also if you want a really big world with a lot of options there from just the Paizo published materials, I think Pathfinder is a great next step. So you've got this love of Pathfinder, Tommy. You've got the internet and maybe some sort of recording
I do.
material. How's it
How's
happen?
it happen? Well, frankly, it was about a year ago. It was the day after Easter last year. I got hired to drive a forklift in a factory, and I end up like, you work long hours. I'm working like 5:30 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, like 7 days a week. It's backbreaking. It feeds me, but it just kind of like, it really sucks. You don't enjoy your life. You come home, I see my wife. Hi, I need to go to bed. I gotta get up at like 3 a.m. to go to work, and you have no time at all. But I had a bunch of money, and I got it into my head I'd start looking at some content creators on Patreon. And you go onto their page and you see they're making just as much money as I am to do what they want. And it just dawns on me that I've been playing for years. I have a lot of love, information, enthusiasm, knowledge about this game. Why not give it a try? And then I did, and I ended up going like, present day, I deliver pizzas at a little pizza joint here in my little small town. And I just kind of like, I got fed up one day with the job I had, and I decided I wanted to try to be somebody more. So I quit that job, went to a job that I work like on a busy week. It's still like a 40-hour job, but it gives me time to do this. And I ordered a Blue Yeti, which like 2 weeks after I got it, my cat knocked it over and it broke. So I was recording with my webcam's mic up until like you start getting like, hey, this, you should do this. This sounds bad. So I break down, buy another Blue Yeti, and it's just kind of been fake it till you make it till we get there. And I'm not going to say like, oh, I've got there, but in the past year, I've hit just about 1,000 subscribers. So I can say personally that I don't regret my decision at all, because it's been a really fun ride. I've made a ton of friends, and it's kind of only like up from here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I wouldn't have you on if I didn't think you made fantastic content. The breadth of content, the depth of content that you make just over the course of weeks or months is kind of, well, it is impressive, but it's also a little daunting to me just for a guy who also works the 40, 50 hour grind just like you do. And I'm kind of easy. I only do like a podcast a week or two or so. But I'm looking at all the videos you're making, and I know that editing is not an easy task, and all this stuff is not an easy task. And now you're mentioning all the difficulties you're dealing with your equipment breaking down and all that stuff, and having to fake until you make it. I totally respect the hustle, man. I'm really impressed
Thank
with
you,
the
dude. I
channel.
really like, from the bottom of my heart, that means so much, because yeah, you're totally right. It's probably like a 4, 5, 6 hour thing most days to record a video, edit a video, make the like Photoshop stuff for the video, upload the video, post it to everywhere, and then you just kind of like lather, rinse, repeat all over again. But the way I see it, like if I'm trying to really do this, if I'm trying to, and YouTube's adpocalypse was kind of like that happened right when I hit like the subscriber benchmark. There's, oh hey, we've changed everything. Oh, okay, thanks. But if I'm gonna realistically ask for people's money, because we have a Patreon and we're trying to like get ads on our stuff and trying to make it for real with Pathfinder on YouTube, I've got to hustle, because why should I ask anyone for anything if I'm not willing to do that? I guess really that's the only thing I took away from driving a forklift in a factory, was everybody's all like, the work ethic there becomes really strong because people have worked there for 25, 30 years and it's all they know. And it's kind of unfortunate because they never get to see their families. I guess, again, I'm not trying to disparage anybody out there who is that kind of person, because it's really hard work. And I'm sure like people respect you for it. But that was what I took away from that, was like, you have to work hard to succeed. And just it comes applied right here to the channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're seeing it, and I think growth is paramount to obviously success on anything you do. But I think growth is so much of hard work meeting opportunity, and you've definitely got the work ethic down. Just look at this man's content. But let's dive into it a little bit here. One of my favorite bits of content on your channel, and one of the ones I'm actually going to be ripping a lot of ideas from and stuff from, is when you go into these small kind of 5 minute lore kind of breakdowns of kind of areas of the Pathfinder regions, of the Pathfinder material there. Let's talk about putting that together. How much prep is there? Because 5 minute videos, realistically, there's a multiplier to how long it takes to do that. How much content and time is there to create
Well,
that?
those 5 minute videos are probably like 20 minutes when I'm done recording it and it's rendering to really a lot of the time is rendering. I'm coming to realize like I need to render it to go in this program, then it renders again, then it gets uploaded, then it gets rendered, and blah blah blah. But those are a lot of the time I have to spend like going around because I've gone through pretty much all of the inner sea region. I think we have like 5 or 6 or 7 regions left. And one of the things I like the most about Pathfinder and its lore is there's definitely a real world equivalent for pretty much everywhere on Pathfinder's world of Galarion, whether that be like if you want to go explore the pyramids, you would go to Osirion where there's a pharaoh and there's mummies and there's like even downright you can worship Ra. Ra has stats, he has domains, all of this stuff. Or if you're trying to find that dystopian, well not dystopian I guess, but like it's kind of like the show I think it's called the 3%. It's on Netflix. It's really good. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Where like think of it kind of like a young adult sci-fi novel, I guess. There's an island called Hermia that has that. You've got a place where demons run wild and a place where Vikings run wild, and even Baba Yaga from like folklore and from an episode of Arthur. I figured out doing a little bit of Googling. She's from here, and so too are all these regions. So a lot of it, fortunately, I've had a lot of time playing around on that map, so I know a lot of it. Fortunately, also, I have a copy of probably my favorite Pathfinder book, The Inner Sea World Guide, which is really comprehensive, and then it's just a matter of trying to find all of the like real world connections one can make. And then at the end, here recently, because I had a comment from someone who actually turned around and became a patron after I responded to it, I'll tie in a little of like, why would you bring your adventurers here? What do your NPCs look like? And fortunately, that just comes from the amount of experience that I've had. Because I have a lot of friends who play this thing. I have a lot of like, both on YouTube and here at home, we run across that map all the time. And so really you just kind of have to jump in to learn it, I think. It's a whole lot of fun to do so for sure. But that's probably where it comes from, is just combination of dive in, a little bit of Google foo to see what the rest of the world is thinking, and just getting in there, reading all the stuff. I will say, like, I think Pathfinder's bloat, which seems to be what people drag on it the most, is a great thing because it's all there. Whatever you want to find, some of the bigger regions in the Inner Sea have their own dedicated book. Like not my live stream. We don't live stream it anymore. My stream takes place right now in Kadira. Kadira has its own splat book. And if you want to learn more, you just dive in right there. Me, I just kind of take all the points together, roll them up, and then release them to you guys. So for those of us who don't have the 5 hours to flip through a 100-page splat book, if you've got 5 minutes, I got your back.
Yeah, and that's a great resource. And it's funny that you mentioned the thing about Pathfinder having the real world kind of mirrors and illusions, as I think everybody who has ever run a homebrew campaign, and I'm assuming, actually I shouldn't assume, have you run a home world, or do you just do exclusively published materials?
Yeah, for sure. My first game was just kind of like, I need a map. Here is a pencil. Here is some notebook paper, and just scribble it in there, and then there's a map. Even like the published stuff in Pathfinder, I will always change stuff to make it fit the party, fit the random hair in my butt that makes me decide, I want to try this. This seems really cool, but let's go that. Because otherwise, like I also like I've played I am playing, I should say. We stream it Tuesday nights on Twitch, Rise of the Rune Lords, which is probably the greatest Pathfinder adventure path. I think so, probably because it's the GM who's running it, but also the AP has a lot of room for you can do whatever you want. There's a lot of wiggle room and downtime there. I play that as well, and I wouldn't consider that published content because there's so much just extra stuff we do, and I definitely think that GMs should take the plot points that are in the world. GMs should take a king and assassinate him and change the alignment of the next king, and now he's on the throne, or something like that, to make the world your own. Because maybe this is just like for me, but I know my players know a lot of it, and then suddenly it's this, oh, what, huh? And everybody's all like scrambling through their notes like, no, it's not like that. It is now.
Yeah, that's exactly one of the things I like to do with my players a ton as well. I joke with them that like, especially when something like, hey, doesn't that seem like a real world equivalent or illusion or reference? Or even I'll make a name that's very obviously a reference to something in the real world. Like, oh, his name is Shaw Wyatt. Like Sean White? Not really, you know. But so I'll lean into that. If so, then you'll have this expectation that the players have when they're going into like, oh, this has a very like, you know, this sounds like a very traditional like Jack and the Beanstalk scenario, and then you flip it on its head and you throw them off, or do the inverse. You have them expect the turn, and then you'll be like, no, this, you know, this thing from popular culture or from other things. Yeah, it's like that, and then immediately they go, oh, I get it. I totally get what this is supposed to be, and that's actually I find is really great for saving GM some time. Is if there's a person for let's say an NPC, or there's a region or an order or any sort of real world illusion you can make that will convey your point. Just go ahead and say it. So when I say the sorceress. Circe of the Magis Concilium looks like Eva Green, everybody goes, oh, I got an idea of what this chick is like immediately. And then, you know, you can kind of run
For
from
sure,
there.
yeah.
So it's funny then that it seems like everybody will do that also in their world as well, because, you know, what this idea was coming from was this thing of like Pathfinder's just doing, I think, what all GMs and DMs end up doing eventually, which is here's an allegory, here's a reference. And when you mentioned how much, you know, published versus homebrew stuff, I actually ran a Reddit poll recently, got about 100 or so votes, and I just pulled up the numbers real quick. Like for how much you homebrew, 45% say they mix homebrew and published for everything, and then 32% say they homebrew everything. So like there's this large contingent of people who want to homebrew and will gladly steal and rip, and, you know, the saying, obviously good artists borrow and great artists steal. So that's
Yeah,
what we
for
do.
sure.
So yeah, so that series is fantastic for getting you a little bit of lore. Now you're getting even deeper now with the Wednesday afternoon worships, where you talk about the religious figures. That's a little more interesting to me because the pantheons for me is one of the things that's I don't think I do enough with my games, and I'll ask you how much you do in your games with God worship and stuff like that. But for me, I've always viewed gods as sort of a reference to be like, well, you're a cleric, so you believe in a god and you'll be righteous, or you'll be chaotic, or you'll be, you know, following these tenets here. But I think going kind of in depth with the lore of a history of a god, because most of my worlds are also homebrew, so like I don't have thousands of years of history, but when you play a game like Pathfinder and you have this established history and this established relationships, you can go into that. How much of that do you use in your own games, or do you pull from?
It depends on the party. It depends on the clerics and paladins, really, to tell you the truth. I know it was a long time ago, but I had a cleric who worshipped they're called Imperial Lords in Pathfinder, which is like a god that has stats and is killable, and her name is Vildius. And there was a lot of stuff I could pull from there, but a lot of times, like religion in the scope, I mean to say, of Pathfinder is kind of like is weird for me because oftentimes I don't GM for divine characters, and even then it's like it seems sometimes it can be really black and white, and like my player's interpretation of it versus my interpretation of like whatever deity might hit the board, it's always going to be that much different. For example, I'm on Fridays, I'm playing a paladin who started out being unaligned, just like invoking the virtues of law and good and stuff like that. And there's the like main paladin goddess in this setting. Her name is Iomade. I did something wrong, and the GM 6 Iomedes herald on me, just, you're being terrible. I'm like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? I'm following this. And it didn't like start like a fist fight or anything, but there was definitely like a 5 minute of, come on, man. Present day, he right now he's worshiping. We're kind of playing 5e style with our paladins because I think that's a little more fair, and really I think that's what's going to happen in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Like we're going to get off that LG corner and we're going to run into everywhere, but he worships a neutral god, and it's become, I don't want to say I'm worshiping a neutral god to avoid consequences, but it's in a setting where the world is ending and everything's a little less black and white. But I like religion in Pathfinder because it always comes with, in addition to like the flavor standpoint, there's stats involved with it. There's Pathfinder calls them deific obediences, and it's a feat, and every like you take it, and then at 12th level you can cast some spells. At 16th you get this thing, and then at 20th you get this other thing. So in addition to having the flavor, which is great flavor, there's a lot of lore on these. Well, some of the gods don't have as much, but there's a lot of lore for the core deities and a little farther out that you can dive into, and it's really fun to read. But at that same time, like one of my favorite gods in Pathfinder is named Erastil, and he lets you at 20th level add wisdom to your attack and damage with a longbow. So then I'm adding a bunch of stats into my rolls, and I shoot real good, essentially. I also like in Pathfinder how, and again, it's another like call out to pop culture, but the gods that we see in like our comic books and in our like old mythology and stuff, they exist in Pathfinder. They grant spells. Some of them you can fight. I didn't realize this until I made the video, and the video was it 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago that I covered Pazuzu, not knowing that was a Mesopotamian entry, not knowing I knew like there was a name of a gargoyle in Futurama, but other than that, I just thought it was some like something from somewhere. Nope, that's from planet Earth. Same thing with like you can worship Cthulhu if you want, probably not recommended for your sanity, but you can worship Cthulhu if you want to. We were talking about this a little bit ago. The ancient Egyptian pantheon exists on Galarion, which is I think we're going to see a lot of it in the playtest adventure for Pathfinder Second Edition when we go to Doomsday Dawn, because it plays a role in that like backstory for that faction. But if you want to build a character who worships like Anubis or Set or Ra or Osiris, whoever, like all the stats are right there in black and white. And it kind of like, again, I guess it's a little more of like, oh, you're worshiping that guy? I know that guy from high school history class, or I've been playing Assassin's Creed Origins, or not a plug for Assassin's Creed Origins, mind you. I just played it earlier. But it's that kind of thing. And as far as religion goes in games, for me, a lot of times it's just, oh yeah, it's that guy. That's cool. But again, it also depends on like the scope of the party. If I have a paladin of X god or a cleric of god Y, obviously they're going to matter more, because like I have someone in the party who is doing that. Ergo, the like microscope pivots that way. But like there will be times when like the core deities of a lot of worlds in certain adventures I've run, like the first time I ever GM'd, it was for a barbarian, a fighter, and a ranger. No gods there. So they just kind of never came up.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of fun for seeing the real world gods kind of get thrown in there, because also like you mentioned a little bit with taking away the lawful good for paladins, and for those who don't know, it's kind of this old D&D rule that paladins can only be lawful good, which 5e kind of did away with, and we're going to get to it second edition in a second, but apparently Pathfinder's kind of looking into as well. I think ultimately we're trying to feed our players the ability to create whatever character and feel powerful and strong, which in whatever way they can possibly do that. So also inviting the other gods, like if you really want to play a devout follower of Baldur or Tyr, or whatever real world reference you want to make, go for it, have fun.
Yeah, for sure. I have a character in the game I'm running now who is a Norse pagan, and I have no stats for that. So I'm just like, I need Loki. Put it together, throw it together, make it happen. Oh, that guy worships Thor, that important NPC in your backstory. Okay, hang on a second. And just kind of slap a thing together.
Yeah, so you also mentioned kind of doing streams for the YouTube stuff as well. Now, that's something that's really blown up in the past couple of years. Was that inspired by any in particular stream, or was that just cool, kind of the next logical step as to what you can add to the content of your channel?
That for me was, I have a personal thing where like if I show up at someone's table and I'm a player, I am then honor bound to run a campaign for as many of those people who are interested as like humanly are possible, because I know how much work goes into a campaign because I GM, and somebody shows up and does that for me. It's only fair I reciprocate. I only ended up getting 2 people from that party. One of them lives in Phoenix, and the other lives in where does Donald live? Ontario, Canada. And I live in Missouri, so it's kind of hard to meet once a week. So it's just kind of like, let's do this thing on Roll20. You guys okay with streaming it? Yeah, okay, cool. And we just kind of dived in. There's definitely, you're right, there have been a lot of really, really, I won't say powerful, yeah, sure, really powerful streams that have brought like this nerd game into the limelight, into the mainstream. And I think like, I won't say everybody's doing it, but I'll say that everybody's doing it more than they were like pre-Critical Role, which really I just started watching like 2 weeks ago. I had no idea what that was until somebody said that like Matt Mercer did this. I'm like, well, who's that? I mean, what, do we have a new friend? Tommy! And then here come all these links, and now I like Critical Role.
Yeah, I think, in my first episode, I kind of touched on this, because the inspiration for the transition for me into GMing was watching Critical Role and stuff like that, watching the streams. And while it wasn't my first thing, Acquisitions Inc. was my first, Critical Role is really I'm a heavy metal guy, so I'm going to make a heavy metal reference. Some people won't know. It's the Metallica for like hard rock heavy metal, like the first one to cross over from that kind of niche underground world and make this thing very popular and mainstream. So, you know, a lot of people obviously talk junk about Metallica, or some people are avid fans and fanatics about Metallica, but you cannot deny, like, that's a very important band when you
I
think
can
heavy
definitely
metal.
say that when I was
So,
like 10 or 11 years old, somebody bought me the Black Album, and now I like progressive death metal. So, yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
hey, we can talk death metal as well. Now it's the second time, avid listeners, and I've got to get somebody here who I can talk about death metal and like heavy metal with. This is good. There's something about metal and RPGs. I'm not joking. Like when you talk to guys who are into like death metal bands or like progressive metal bands or technical metal bands, and you see like, or power metal, especially power metal guys are RPG fans. I don't care what you say. There's no dude who's playing guitar for a band called like Dragonheart or Winter's Fire or some variation of a fantastical name with a Tolkien-esque album cover that does not like RPGs. I will fight.
That doesn't
them
just
all.
have a D20 and is like that little pocket in your jeans where you keep your picks. There's also just there just in case. Yeah, I know what you mean.
I guarantee you can go up to the singer or anybody in Blind Guardian and ask them about their D&D character, and they'll be able to tell you.
Yup.
But yeah, so so Critical Role is kind of that now for all this kind of generation. So it's funny that you're getting into it kind of after the fact, when the vast majority of people kind of first, maybe not their first, but definitely the biggest infection vector for online streaming RPGs is Critical Role. So what sort of like challenges or sort of obstacles did you find in kind of putting all that stuff together and getting it up online?
Really, it's just like the little stuff has been what we've tripped over. I've recently like moved my whole computer setup so I have a backdrop, but before that, my computer was at like a 90-degree angle ish to my wife's computer, and she plays with us. So she'll be facing this way and I'll be facing 90 degrees the other way, and the mic is over here. So I have to like nudge her in the ribs, just hey, look here when you're talking, please. And it's just that kind of thing. I know the very first episode of the game is called Lordly Caliber, and yes, it's based off the N64 Ogre Battle game. The very first one was the only one we actually tried to stream, and the audio was just like I didn't know what I was doing. I was just okay. Here's OBS. This says start streaming, go, and the audio was so terrible. I had to download it and buy a bunch of programs to get it up to like at least bearable, and then re-upload it. But even then, like as we're learning, as I'll be like session 7, 8, 9, I'll realize that I had the volume on like in OBS for my desktop audio down too low, or my desktop's actual physical volume down too low, so nobody's getting heard, or there's too much background noise somewhere. Again, I also didn't realize that like I won't say how necessary good gear is, because yeah, sure, it totally is, but I didn't realize how big the disparity was, because it's like my schedule becomes come home, go to the gym for a little while, and then jam out a video. I don't have a lot of time to stop and analyze until somebody's like, hey, you should do it this way because this. And then suddenly it's like put right in my face, and I realize there needs to be a change, which is basically like that's why I'm saying the channel has been maybe not so much now that we've got our like footing under us, but we were very, 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 very fake it till you make it at the very beginning. I remember like my first few videos were recorded on an iPhone, and I would just take the audio, upload them, strip the video, and just put slides over top, because at the time that's just what we had.
But yeah, say what you will, but that's that type of drive I was talking about a little bit earlier, which you want. I mean, yes, audio is very important. Equipment is very important. I tell you, of course, on a podcast. But like, what I found from a lot of people is they can ignore a bad visual, but if the sound hurts, they're like, I'm not wasting my time with this. So yeah, upgrading equipment is kind of essential and something I think makes a lot of sense there as well. You've also got, and I love it, is kind of the audio, the visual components of kind of reference materials and stuff like that from the background. And that I'm assuming that takes time to like pull for your channel and stuff like that as well. And are some of those commissions, or do you, how does all that work?
Most
together?
of the stuff that comes down like on the videos is stuff I make myself. Like I have a graphic design degree that I'm in the process of paying down, but I have all that stuff there, and I have the know-how to like throw everything together. Of course, I have a couple of artists in my back pocket in case I never ever need like art for this token, or like I have a mini painting guy that I'll use for my giveaways once like his, now that Gary Con's over and he's not like painting minis for the Gygax family, I think I could probably call on him for a giveaway. But a lot of the stuff I do is pretty much just 110% myself. Just kind of like, I need to do this. I don't know how to do this. Google for 5 hours. Okay, got it. And then just run from there.
That's awesome. That's that can do attitude I like to hear. But you mentioned earlier, and I think it bears repeating. Pathfinder kind of being your big focus, kind of your concentration. Second edition, it's coming along, man. What are our thoughts? And I know you probably have a ton of videos. I mean, I've seen some of them, but like let's just generally go over this. What do you feel about second edition? Because from what I'm hearing is it's going for a more streamlined approach.
Yeah, second edition is going to shake up a lot of things. I will say the very first video or blog rather that Paizo put out for second edition that came out on my 27th birthday, and I come home from work and somebody put it in chat like, hey guys, look. And suddenly I realized that everything's going to change. And at first I was freaking out, terrified, because I have all these characters I haven't played and this stack of character sheets that's 10 miles high that I need to do in campaigns, and but the more you read into it, the more you see, like, really it seems like they're going to keep all of the crunch and all of the customization that we love in Pathfinder, but they are definitely going to streamline things. A lot of stuff is going to be in Pathfinder. I don't know if this is probably the case in 5e for a couple items, but in Pathfinder I know there's like 5 or 6 items that every single solitary character forever has to spend the gold on, or as you level up you just kind of like you fall behind, you can't keep up. Second edition is doing away with that. For all the Pathfinders out there, the fighter can craft his own magic items in Pathfinder second edition, which is huge because again, like, you need stuff like that to function, and the list will be considerably smaller now in second edition, but it's going to be pretty much the same thing, I think. This morning, actually, my channel put out a video on, they're calling them ancestries now instead of races because there's a little more mutability in there. But they put out the ancestries for the elves and the dwarves for second edition, and it looks pretty much exactly the same. Just some of the stuff that's kind of like situational. For example, a dwarfs +1 to hit versus orcs and stuff. You can take that if you want it. If you don't want it, you don't have to take it. They're changing the way ability scores are generated and how they level up. Everything's getting not a from the ground overhaul, I'll say, but it's kind of like how 3.5 goes into Pathfinder as a cleanup. It's that same idea, Pathfinder 1e to Pathfinder 2e. It will definitely, like, I don't want to say this early on, it will be less crunchy because I think it still will be, but I think it'll be more crunchy in the terms of that customization that you want to build this, okay, got it, cool, do it. And less in terms of like 5 hours of bookkeeping in between sessions, that kind of thing. I definitely am, like, I am very, very stoked for it. I'm very, very stoked for Paizo for putting this out, frankly, because that's where like all the growth from this channel is. I remember the lead designer, Eric Mona, for Paizo Productions, he retweeted one of my videos like 2 weeks ago, and I get it sent, like, my wife runs the Twitter, and I get a picture of like this guy retweeting me, like, I know that name. Who's that's Eric Mona. Okay. And then the channel just exploded pretty much in terms of subscriber count. I guess right now it's still kind of like, I am nervous for it. I would be lying if I said I wasn't, but it's not like nervous for impending doom so much as like there's this new thing around the corner and it's going to be different and I can't wait to see it.
With the it's going to sound like a leading question regardless, but so with that explosion and stuff like that, does that reaffirm your drive to continue the channel or to work harder and keep you going?
Oh, you have no idea, man. Oh yeah, it totally does. I like, it is hard to do this. It is, well, not hard, I'll say it is very time consuming to do this. It's a very like big monster that I've taken in to try to do this, and it feels amazing to come home from work and I'll have like 15 notifications on YouTube and like 10 of them are, hey man, you're gonna blow up, that's so great, keep up the good work, or hey man, give me like a week and I'll jump on Patreon, this looks so great, and all this stuff. Like, it feels like I'm not just screaming into the void anymore in terms of like I remember I'd put out a video and it would get 100 views and I'd lose my mind because those so many views back in the day, and now one of my second edition videos is pushing 10,000. And I remember when that ticked over 1,000, just, oh, look at that. And then the next day it's 2,000 and up, 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 up. It kind of feels like things are starting to open up for the channel. It's a really exciting time for me because I have all these opportunities up to and including coming here on this podcast with you. And it's just like, it feels really good, and definitely, yeah, it's an affirmation that I am on the right path. We keep marching forward. We're going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, pun intended, you finding this path and having the positive feedback coming from it, and also like, and this is a lesson I learned from a great German friend of mine, Dan Wallace, who humbled me a long time ago when I started way back. The reason I have like you guys don't see this because obviously it's an audio podcast, but I still have my old logo of the rooster or the cock talking to the microphone because of my very first podcast and like show on YouTube like 4 or 5 years ago called Cocktails, and he kind of humbled me and he gave me this kind of idea that like, just conceptualize whenever somebody goes to talk. Conceptualize your views as somebody every day or every week or however often you release content. That these number of people go into either a hall or a room or whatever to hear you talk or to listen to you talk or to be with you or be around you. So when you get 15, 30, 100, 300, 1,000, imagine how crazy it would be if every week you walked into a concert hall and there's 1,000 people looking at you and waiting to listen to you talk about shit or waiting to listen to you sing or whatever you do. You'd be fucking ecstatic and you'd be super happy. You'd never take that for granted. You'd feel special. So any number you receive of viewers and content and subscribers of any kind, you should really appreciate, be humbled by it. And then to watch you have that idea for 100, and then I've seen you now have thousands, and I'm almost certain you're going to have tens of thousands eventually with the amount of content you do if you keep it up. So yeah, that's a good thing to hear. It's a great, also it humbles me and it makes me happy to do these things as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like even the smallest things that my channel does, which my stream is one of them, because like again, it started off on the back foot and just kind of like zombie limped on it for like 10 sessions until we figured it out. Those will get like 30 views, but those 30 views still matter. Those 30 views feel really good because that means that like I come from a very small town. My graduating high school class was 37 people. That's how many people are watching my friends and I roll dice once a week. And that feels really great that somebody out there thinks I'm good enough at this to, even before like thousands of views and patronage and everything else, to just like come hang out for a couple hours. It feels really good.
That's fantastic. And if anybody listening now wants to get to contact you or see your content, why don't you just tell them where to go, buddy?
Black Dragon Gaming. There are like 5 or 6 Black Dragon there are like 5 or 6 Black Dragon Gaming channels out there. We're the most popular one now, and I had to keep it because my first character was a Black Dragon disciple, and it's like, that is my name. I will take it. We're on YouTube. We probably eventually will hit Twitch. We're Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, all the social media stuff. We put videos out. Present video schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're talking about 1E stuff. Tuesdays and Saturdays, it's second edition. Our stream goes up on Sundays. And then every other Saturday, we do something like this with our brother channel, the Inn of Planar Crossroads. Super good guys. You should check them out for sure. But yep, Black Dragon Gaming on YouTube. That's where you can find me.
And don't forget to support them on Patreon as well, because these people, and you in particular, I think are fantastic and going to do a lot of great things. And if you want to contact me, of course, the Twitter is classy_Don. That's DON. The podcast is, of course, MyRPG Podcast. You can find us on Podbean, now iTunes, and anywhere podcasts are heard. Any questions and any inquiries, you can also send it to the Gmail, which is myrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at the table.